So Monte contacted us that he wanted to come and be a Perk Up speaker. So thank you, Monte, for taking time out of your day to come and talk to us. So you have several businesses or are involved in several businesses, but one that you wanted to highlight is the ice storage company that you currently have in Council Bluffs.
Yep.
So we would love to hear about your journey and specifically about that new business, and I'll just let you go from there.
Okay. Well, it's nice to be in a room full of people who are trying to crack the entrepreneurial code, because I'm doing the same thing you are, and that isn't easy. So it's nice to be surrounded with a room full of people who are trying to figure it out, because we're doing the same thing. I thought this would be interesting because it's something new, and we actually don't have a business yet. We'll have a business tomorrow. So I'm calling tomorrow Got Their Day, because we've been at it for about 2.5 years. So it feels good to kind of be really close, but we're not officially open yet. It's tomorrow. So I put a sheet on each person's chair. I've got more if anybody needs one, but you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I think the picture on the back might be where you want to start, because.
You need another one, right?
Okay. And you can go to the website IceCapColdStorage.com to, you know, dig a little deeper. But I think this, you know, I guess the purpose of today is probably to warm up a cold industry. So, and that's the mission of IceCap Cold Storage. It's warm service in a cold industry. Cold storage has been around for decades. It's a really necessary part of the entire just feeding the world issue, which is becoming harder and harder every year because, you know, population keeps expanding. So we are fortunate to actually live in what's known as the breadbasket of the world. So it's pretty cool to be part of providing the solution for, you know, world hunger, and cold storage is a critical element of that. And everyone has heard about the supply chain issues. I mean, it's certainly one of the biggest challenges facing manufacturing as well as other industries, but the food industry is not exempt from that. So cold storage helps solve part of the problem of food waste, and we produce tons of food, but 40% of it is pitched. It's amazing how much food waste happens, and we have modern cold storage. So it's a bigger problem than you know, we can solve, but we're excited to be part of it. And you know, when you translate that, that's 119 billion pounds of food that is pitched every year, and that translates into it's like 30 billion meals a year. So if we can move the needle on that, that would go a long ways towards solving world hunger. So we're particularly excited about this facility because one of the things about the cold storage industry is that the average age of cold storage facilities is over 30 years old. And translated, that means the average height of cold storage buildings is about 32 feet tall. And what you see on the back of your page there is a 55-foot tall building. So it is, that is as tall as modern forklifts that have maximum flexibility will go. You can go higher, and many cold storage facilities are taller than that. But those cold storage facilities have a specific product that come in there, and they can go that tall with robotic equipment. So as long as you have the same pallet size, the same product, day after day, you can go taller. But if you're building for whoever that needs cold storage, you've got to go, you can't go that high. So, but this is as high as you can go now. And this is incredibly efficient. And so it's efficient mostly because not only the technology, but labor. And labor is the most expensive item because we're handling people's products, and that takes people on equipment. So it's cheaper to go up than it is to go out. So this is a strategic location in Council Bluffs, with it being right near I-29 and I-80. And if you look at it, there's the Union Pacific Rail Yard is behind it. So rail is actually the greenest form of transportation. You don't think of rail as green, but if you do the math, every rail car replaces 3 or 4 semis on the road, and you can they tie hundreds of cars together. So a couple of locomotives can literally take hundreds of trucks off the interstate. So it's incredibly green, and it's also incredibly strategic because of what we produce, mostly proteins in this area, beef, pork, to some extent chicken. We can export that and feed the world. So, and if it's frozen, it preserves. So our facility will be somewhere between -2 and 0. Depending on the product, we can take that down to -20. And the expensive part of this isn't necessarily the equipment, but it's the floor. And the floor has to be heated so that temperature doesn't penetrate and then heave the ground. And you've got to keep the floor perfectly flat because you're taking products up 50 feet tall. If there's any kind of tipping, it's dangerous. So massive equipment, massive construction, super high tech, lots of safety components, and we open tomorrow. So we are,
How did you come up with this concept, or what led you to land where you are going to open tomorrow? How can you talk a little bit about that process of, because you own other businesses that aren't in this industry, so what was kind of your thought processes, and do you have partners?
Right now, my wife's my partner.
Okay.
And she's the one that says yay or nay, so I answer to her. But I think in a lot of ways you kind of you don't know necessarily what your calling in life is, and I'd be one of those people. So that's kind of evolved, and I don't. I thought I would be a milkman when I grew up. I wanted to be a milkman.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I wanted to be, and actually that's what I became. I got a food science degree from the University of Nebraska, and an MBA, and I started out in the dairy processing industry.
Okay.
I spent a decade there, and I got a little bored. It just I like to solve problems, and we had a really good food plant manager that just predicted every single problem, and so I didn't have anything to fix anymore. So it just got really boring, and filling out forms every day and not fixing anything was just my life became miserable. I didn't know what to do about it. I was not prepared for it. College doesn't really prepare you for, what are you necessarily good at? There's not a lot of preparation for that, so you kind of have to try things. And so that, long story short, I went into commercial real estate development, and the company's called U.S. Property, and so U.S. Property is a real estate holding company. IceCap Cold Storage is one of the companies, and so I I never dreamed I'd go into real estate development. But, one thing led to another, and a lot of times it's not necessarily what you do, but who you run into and how they may impact you. So I think that's probably more the theme than anything. So all that to say that I really never thought I'd end up in where we are, but I saw the need, and a lot of it actually took place during COVID because life changed, and I spent time doing different things like Zoom meetings and talking about different topics because you couldn't meet with people, and this is one topic that was part of my real estate group, and so it's like, and this is kind of, this thought of cold storage has been incubating for about 25 years. And so it's kind of like, maybe building new cold storage would be a better plan than buying existing, because if we built new, that would be better and more modern and more efficient. And so that's kind of how it started, and found this property in Council Bluffs and thought, given the transportation elements to it, that would de-risk this big decision.
So you talked a little bit, Monte, about the cold storage that's currently available and the age of that. I'm assuming that gives you a competitive advantage, that you're a new player in this industry. What do you foresee as the future for this, since many of the facilities are older? Are they upgrading, or what do you foresee as the future? If you can look into this.
Yeah, that's a tough question because we're so new at it. So
okay.
I wouldn't. We know a lot about cold storage, but that one would be a tough one for me to answer. But
okay.
But I do think that it will be, as it becomes. We do have a competitive advantage in a lot of ways. In other ways, we're the new kid on the block, so we have a competitive disadvantage. So, and it's very, like everything, it's very relationship driven. So, we have to convince customers that we will handle their products as good or better than they do. And so that takes, building on past reputation. It takes hiring people that have great industry experience. It is, so our mission is warm service in a cold industry, because the industry is dominated by two major companies. And so, when you get to a certain size, I think it's easier to kind of maybe not have as warm a service. And so I think that'll be ultimately our competitive advantage.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about how you got into commercial real estate because you found yourself being bored.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we always ask our guests is, what gets you up in the morning? What do you do to keep yourself motivated? What keeps you going?
I was on a Zoom call yesterday and talking to a banker, and he said, it's pretty obvious you don't really need an ambition pill.
Okay.
So I don't have trouble being motivated, but I would say ultimately, I would say probably my faith, because whatever we build, I don't think it's going to last forever. So it's kind of like, if we can have a positive impact on people while we're here, that's what makes it worth it.
Okay. We also ask our guests, what are some of your favorite local businesses that you like to support, be it restaurants, just local businesses?
Well, at the risk of leaving a whole lot of businesses out that deserve mention. I'm going to say Coffee House at 1320p, and I brought 2 gift cards for the drawing. I think they have the best coffee in town. They're also a tenant, so. But the guy that owns that started that when he was 17 years old, and I mean, he's just, Mark Schreiner, he's just an amazing guy. And, you know, he had that concept before Starbucks was even a thought, so. So Coffee House, and then Blue Orchid, they're also a tenant, but my wife and I's favorite restaurant, so.
And are there any books that you find that you go back to, or do you read a lot of that? We have a book club, so
yeah.
I love to read, but I feel I'm also a learner, and I feel like sometimes I'm a little jaded in that area. But do you have anything that you keep going back to?
I do. I mean, we run on a system called Traction. I'm sure a bunch of you are exposed to that or use it. So Get a Grip is a book I hand to everybody that comes to work at U.S. Property, and the IceCap leadership team. It's just a way for companies to, if you have an entrepreneur leading the company, which is very common, it's a way for the team to stay connected and everybody row in the same direction. So that's been a key, and we've been doing that for about 5 years. And then the classic of Good to Great, I think. You know, it's kind of been forgotten to some extent, but it's about, I bet it's about 15 years old, but it's still great data and really good concepts in there.
We just finished reading Rocket Fuel in our book club, so.
It's a good book.
It is a good book. So we had great conversations in our book club about that. So I'd like to open it up to all of you. Do you have questions at all for Monte?
What do you think are 2 of your biggest risks in the IceCap business, and how are you addressing them?
There's probably, I mean, there's certainly a huge list, but probably, you know, the industry itself, there's a huge barrier to entry because 85% of customers are all month to month. So you have a huge investment, and the vast majority of the business could walk out the door the next month. So biggest risk is probably the leadership, because the leadership has to deliver, has to really own the culture of we're here for our customers. And if that slips, it doesn't take long for customers to start going, okay, this is just not working, and then there's nothing to really tie them to the building. So it's the structure that customers are all month to month. And probably the other thing is just that every time an industry or something gets hot, there tends to be too much, you know, like we overreact and we build too much. And, you know, cold storage sounds weird to say this, but it's hot. So it's hot, and there's a lot of people getting into the market. So oversupply could be the other biggest risk. But it takes so long to build these that it'll take a couple years, but that could happen.
Jim, did you have a question?
I want to get back to your inspiration for the concept for ice cold storage, IceCap storage. I mean, how much of it was an economic decision, but how much of it was based on desire to serve? Because you mentioned food security, well, not food security, but you mentioned food waste, you mentioned COVID. So I'm just curious, I mean, is this mostly an economic venture, or is this combination economic and social responsibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the hook was probably economic. It's like, because I'm always looking for opportunity, and so my one, if for people that use Traction, you do a weekly scorecard. My one scorecard item that I'm responsible to the group is to make one written offer to purchase real estate somewhere in the country every week. So I probably write 100 offers a year, and so I'm always seeking out opportunity. But what we seek out is opportunity where it's maybe the wrong owner, or something just isn't working, and it's so that we can fix a problem. And if you do that well, we make money. So I've got that lens on every day, but that isn't you don't. I mean, if it was just economics, maybe we'd all sell drugs. I don't know, but we probably would. But it was more like, as you peel the layers back, like, I'm from Nebraska. I love doing anything I can do that could kind of promote what we do well in this part of the country. That checks a box. My background of food science and that checked the box. So it just kind of, it like, wow, this really could be something. I mean, it's, any kind of decision like that, you kind of go pros and cons. Wow, and this one really came down to, okay, I mean, I say my wife's my boss. That's pretty, I mean, we do things together, but I asked her because I'm not very good at reading people, and I'm going to different parts of the country to buy property, and in the real estate world, there are a lot of people who aren't very honest. And so they'll distort kind of what the realities are of the property. And I can't read that very well. And people that are good at deception are really good at deception. So I on any major acquisition, I drag her along, and she has to. Her job is to read people, and she's pretty good at other components of it too. But her usually the green light is she's not a risk taker, and I'm a calculated risk taker, and so usually she'll say I'm not opposed to it, and that means that's a green light. It's like, okay. This one is like, okay, I'm 63 years old, and this is the biggest swing we've ever taken. This one, you've got to do this or this. And if it's this, then we're not doing it. So that's how we got to that decision. It's like we did a lot of research, and it just seemed like, because you have to pull the trigger without any customers.
So your wife said okay and gave you the thumbs up.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're excited about this. We pulled this is built for 3 phases, and we pulled the trigger on phase 2 before we, we're finishing phase 1 tomorrow. So phase 2 is under construction because there really is a lot of demand, and the bigger the facility, the more efficient it is. So, yeah.
So I have a technical question now. I mean, picking up on what you just said, though. So you must have different sections within the facility because you need different temperatures for different foods. So
yes.
Somehow you compartmentalize
Yep.
the facility. Okay.
Yeah, there's interior partition walls, so you can set temperatures, basically anything. So we can and we probably will set one to be a cooler, not freezer. There's all kinds of different needs that customers have. Turkeys, they require, when they're harvested, you have to freeze them, and then when Thanksgiving comes around, you have to thaw them so that they're ready for the grocery store. You have to do that in a series of weeks so that they taste great, and that requires a freezer that you can change the temperature and do that process consistently, and the same temperature from, the bottom, north corner of the building to the upper south corner of the building. Yeah.
So is your focus mainly local right now, or it's local with intentions of fill in the blank to reach further out, as in, I would presume local includes all the states, but further out to out of the states?
We're starting with local. Our first customer is Skinner Bakery in Omaha, and they will be showing up tomorrow with 10 truckloads of brownies and danishes and product off their line, and this is pretty cool because they, instead of shipping it 200 miles to Kansas City, they'll ship it 13 miles, and we'll freeze it and then ship it to Walmart. So it will go nationally from Omaha, and then another potential customer that we're talking to has a pork processing plant in Minnesota, and 85% of their volume goes to China and Japan, and that would ship by rail. So yeah, it's kind of, shipping from Minnesota to Council Bluffs is a long ways, but there aren't very many cold storage facilities that have rail. So it gives a unique opportunity to ship Midwest product to, across the world.
So when this is a success, are you already looking at a second location?
Yes, we have a site in North Platte that's under contract, and we're working on it, and it has rail also. Yeah.
So was there any, when you did your market research, was there any customer base out there that surprised you that you weren't quite aware of that would utilize your service?
No. I read several things. I didn't really get to the customer level, just that, it's kind of like, seems like there's enough demand that if we did this, we'd fill it. So, and we only have one customer, and we have 20% of, and they'll use 20% of our space, but their product rotates really frequently, so that they're a really good, and it's full pallets. So we'll get into anything from full pallets to case picking to we may even do further processing for like some of the meat companies. We may do some trimming. We may box product for them. It's like we can kind of do a whole gamut of services. So, yeah. And the other thing is that customers won't, you really can't have meaningful conversations with customers when you're like, we broke ground 14 months ago, and they really don't want to talk to you. Until you can say, you can ship your product or we'll be open next month, those conversations are, you just don't, they don't even want to talk to you. Yeah.
So you talked about traction in the EOS system. Within that, the visionary and the integrator, I can see both qualities in what you're talking about and who you are. Where do you see yourself? Are you a visionary?
Sometimes I flip. I'm mostly visionary, but I prefer having an integrator. But when we decided to do this, it's like, okay, we need to shift to have a kind of a different structure. So right now I'm kind of playing both visionary and integrator. So that's probably not a sustainable role for me. I can be detailed, but it takes a lot of effort. So probably not a great answer, but welcome to entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Renee, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think you're fascinating. Congratulations. This is a big undertaking.
Thank you.
For the state, but I'm curious if you have any problems that you think need solving that you don't have time to tackle.
Oh man, I always have those. You know, right now today we get what's called the TCO, which means we can actually, the construction's approved and we can accept product. So, but we were hoping we would get that on Tuesday, and I wasn't there in Council Bluffs when the inspector went through, but the inspector, what I heard, so this could be off, and I know this is recorded, so I'm gonna put that as a disclaimer. But I heard that two of the things that caused us not to pass on Tuesday was the coffee maker and a soap dispenser. It's like, and there's probably something bigger than that, but it's like, the Council Bluffs IceCap team, and I am super excited about it. Our team is just, they are living it, and they're super passionate about the mission and the values. And so, there was some angst, like, oh my gosh, because, we were hoping we'd get the pass on Tuesday. And there's quite a bit of angst. It's like, we built a lot of buildings, and so it's like, this is not unusual. In fact, I was expecting it. But it was such a great feeling to go, you know what? I'm not even gonna worry about this because I've got the right people to deal with it. So I don't feel that often. I don't feel that way that often. It's usually like, okay, now what am I gonna do? But that was cool to just go, okay, 2 years of effort to get the right people and prepare and, do this giant project plan on this building. It may not sound complex, but I think we had 729 tasks that were all dependent on something that had to be done for us to open tomorrow. And one person led that component, the project plan. It was like 729, and it's all, if this doesn't happen, then this, it's just all these contingencies because everything's dependent on something. So extremely complicated. So anyway, I feel pretty good right now.
As long as the coffee maker and the soap dispenser.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that was not in your realm of possibilities.
We weren't planning on that.
Not planning on that. Surprising.
Yeah.
What were some key assets or strengths that you brought to the project that gave you the confidence to pull the trigger?
Well, in real estate, the rule that you never should violate is don't overpay. Because if you overpay, something that you don't plan on that's probably not very good is going to happen. And if you don't have some margin into the buy side, then you're probably you may survive one, but if you have another one, then it's probably gonna go south. So it's really being disciplined enough to, we took a big risk, but it was a calculated risk, and we spent a lot of time on, is this too much? Is this appropriate? And so we actually, we initially started by, we're gonna do this in our backyard. We're gonna do it in Lincoln. And we hit a barrier there, so then this site in Council Bluffs came up. I was like, oh, that's better. Maybe we'll come back to Lincoln and revisit that later. But I'd just say, in the real estate world, you have to buy right. If you overpay, your fate is probably sealed. It may not be right away, but
So did you feel that your experience brought you to that point where you could identify?
yeah.
Were there any other pivot points, unexpected things that happened that you had to pivot?
Little things, all along the way. I mean, anytime you try to build something in America, there's a lot of regulation. And so, there were lots of little surprises, but I will say that, we're going to do a ribbon cutting on March 15th, and the mayor and the economic development person in Council Bluffs will be there. And, I'll say that Council Bluffs really, they have the right attitude with how can we help. And, they subscribe to the national code, and, it's just hard to build things. I mean, this is a former UP rail site, and UP, any of the railroads, it's really an interesting situation because railroads have eminent domain. I mean, they're private companies, but they're the only companies in America that have the ability to condemn your property, and which is bizarre, like that a private company could condemn your property. But they have that power, which is what was granted back in the 1800s. And so, they're going to be our partner because we're shipping stuff on UP Rail. But it was a former rail site, and UP's a very big company. And so, trying to get a decision, their real estate side said we have to have 11 approvals to get anything approved. It was like 11. So they had some utilities that came across the property, and just like things we'd never run into before because it was UP land way back when. And
so was this site one that was for sale, or you identified it and had to talk them into liquidating?
No, it was for sale. A private individual bought it, a couple decades ago, and just had never built on it. And there aren't that many of those around anymore. Something that big. I mean, ideally, you want to start with something that's 80 acres because the infrastructure is so expensive. This is 34 acres, but there aren't very many sites that have rail. So you kind of go, okay, well, we still could build a big enough facility that this should work well.
I'm interested in your visionary aspects, where one of your main strengths is, other than being an integrator. How do you balance the optimism of being a visionary with the realistic side of life? And do you often get yourself into the risk aspect of it? There's always risk. How do you manage risk in a chaotic environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I go back to, I think it's Proverbs 13:20 says, "He who walks with the wise will be wise, and the companion of fools will suffer harm." And I think, okay, basically that says, whoever you surround yourself with, they rub off on you. That's how we're wired. So, I try to surround myself with people who are different than I am, and so the person that I have worked with for 14 years is the opposite of a risk taker, and she's very detailed, and usually I have a lot of ideas, and I know that a lot of them are not very good. So I run almost everything by her. Like, hey, what about this? And probably 3 out of 5 are shot down. Like, okay, but I guess I listen to people's input, and that doesn't mean I necessarily always go along with it, but I really try to encourage other people to, like, what do you think? And be open to, their ideas, because yeah, there's a lot of ways to go broke.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
If UP wasn't operating on that track, how difficult was it to get them to come back to meet with you?
Well, UP, there's UP. I think. I mean, we're just early in the relationship, but I think it's almost like having 10 different companies, and so the real estate is a different company than the operational side, and so it's almost like. We're early on, so I'm not quite sure, but I don't think, this particular issue is going to necessarily impact this issue over here. So, but the other thing I've learned is that, as soon as you get face to face with somebody, it's a whole different experience than an email or trying to reach. It's kind of like there's a tower and you have to climb the tower and like, hello, and then there are people just like everybody else. So
you're saying, Monte, even though you're dealing with UP corporate, you could be working with 10 different people depending upon what operation you want to partner with.
Yes, I mean we're adding a spur that has 2 tracks. And just going through that design process is like you have to hire a consultant who knows how to work with UP, and then you have to, like, whatever the specific situation is, you have to make sure the curve isn't too much and the elevation's right, and you have enough car storage so that you're not asking someone from UP to come and move the cars that are now on your property. And it's really like, it's a whole different business segment. And we had to buy a machine that actually, called a track mobile, that moves cars back and forth, in front of our rail doors. And so that we can serve our customers quicker and not wait for the UP guy to come over. And so it's like, it is interesting. It'll be a year from now, I'm sure I'll know more than I know now, but.
Well, we'd love to have you come back in a year, talk about your 1-year anniversary.
That would be fun.
That would be, and I'm sure we'll have learned a lot in that year.
Yeah, it'll be. Yeah, it's kind of exciting. We're pumped.
Yeah.
I would like to mention the real estate side. It's on the table there, if I could.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is a little variety. So there is a brochure. If someone wants to stay in a 6-bedroom condo in downtown Lincoln in the Grand Manse, the penthouse, there's a flyer on that. It's kind of unique.
Place, let me tell you, people, it is a really nice place.
It's a very unique thing. It doesn't feel like Lincoln. And if you want to do a corporate retreat or a special occasion, it's just cool. 1904 building. Also, we tend to hear a lot of people, we're going to convert an office space into salons. It seems like there's always people looking for a salon space. So think of co-working for salon people.
It's interesting you say that. In my last semester in my intro to entrepreneurship class, that was what one of my students, that was the business that she wanted.
Well,
Yeah, she
we
didn't
might
have
need
the capital to be able to build that, but
okay. We might need somebody to run this,
Okay.
but we're going to create it. So that's that one. If someone wants to have just a private office that's super cheap in downtown Lincoln, we got like 2 of those, 815 O Street. And then this one is, if you want to have a small office in what used to be the power utility room of a 1904 building, this is super cool. It's in the basement, but it has natural light, which, go figure. So we just created that. Part of what we love doing is kind of repurposing historic property, and that's that one. That's it.
Okay.
So, a little variety there.
Thank you, Monte.
You bet.
Any final questions for Monte?
Gift cards?
I feel like I got a great education today. And Monte was gracious enough to bring a couple gift cards. So who has the sign up?
I do.
Okay. Did everyone sign in? Okay. Andrew, give me a number. Philip, your winner.
All right.
And Patty, would you give me a number? We're up to 14. Thaddeus. Yay.
Nice.
So if we could all, thank you again, Monte.
You bet.
And
My pleasure.
I'm going to check with you in a year so that
Okay.
we can have you back. So if we could all give a round of applause for Monte, and thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
And we will see everyone next week.
Kelly Ross.
Kelly Ross from Echo Collective will be here. So a great presentation. We look forward to hearing from Kelly. So we'll all see everybody next week.